Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever or whenever you may be. And for some of you, it's an hour later. Is the daylight's savings or the switching of the clocks? Um, I am DM Foss. This is the overnight. And right now it's just me. Baron couldn't make it. He's got some stuff he's taking care of. G Webs, how's it going tonight?
Oh, fair to Medlin. Thanks for hosting. Thanks for the link.
Um, in the description, there's links to some of the stuff I use for research. I didn't label them, so um, go ahead and look at all of them, read all of them, um, take them to heart. There'll be a test at the end. But tonight we were going to talk about the um, National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act. Um, the National Firearms Act was the first well, it wasn't the first gun control act, really. I think it was the first national. Um, hopefully I put a link I came across the page that listed like all statewide gun control by year. Hopefully I did. I don't know, I was looking at a bunch of stuff a little bit earlier, so I don't remember exactly what I put.
We talking about the description of the video?
Well, a link for the page. I don't know. Hopefully I did. If I didn't, well, there's one out there. If you look long enough, you'll probably find it. So, see, Woods is asking, am I going to join for book club? No, because I'm going to be working. So I work while barbecue's chat's going, so I can't join in on his chats. But so out there tonight we had Wesley Foster, Gun Websites, Gizzard Gary, and Woods. Oh, good evening, everybody. Oh, let me get the banner going. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a email link on tacticalfoss@gmail.com and a link if you have comments, suggestions, or want to send in pictures within reason. Those are a couple of ways you can do that. And in the description for the video, there's a link for the Gilded server. It's another place to kind of hang out, chit chat with other people, share memes, pictures, and whatnot. So the NFA, the National Firearms Act. When you research it, you see a lot. Most of the stuff that you read will talk about it's a response to the crime that was going on after the prohibition started. It I won't say fueled, but it sparked. We'll say sparked the bootlegging and the crime associated with bootlegging, and so you had gangs fighting gangs, and so the NFA was a response to that, and the National Firearms Act put a tax on short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, silencers, and machine guns. But if you, again, this is hopefully I put the link in. I came across the senator that was pushing the bill and what he had to say about it. And I'm a little bit unorganized. I apologize for that. I don't have what he was saying, but basically they were levying a large tax on the items, so not to outright ban them, but to make it so people will not purchase them because they're prohibitively expensive. And then eventually people won't own them because people aren't buying them. It's kind of how it shook out. Also, there was the aspect of they wanted to ban handguns, but couldn't. And because they wanted to ban handguns, they feared that people would substitute shortened rifles and shortened shotguns to replace those. So those got added in to the NFA. But when handguns were removed, because they didn't believe they could pass it with handguns in there, everything else was left in, and that's what got passed. And feel free to join in on any of this, that G-Webs, because
Yeah, I could go on and on, so I don't want to like interrupt you and just start laughing. But
oh, feel free to add in on anything, because I know you have. I'll research this a lot more and have quite a bit more knowledgeable on this than I am. So I'm happy to hear any comments.
I only know the sketch of it too, and that's one of the things I'd like to research more, or at least find someone who has researched it and talk to them or something. But I mean, in a nutshell, that's what you said. Organized crime started with the prohibition, the ATF, or the beginnings of it. Beginnings of federal agents were armed and designed to head out after the criminals. Since those criminals had guns, they decided to make laws about guns. So I guess the only thing I'll add is, were the criminals a big deal? Question mark. I suggest that I've read some stuff, or it's not like I came up with this out of nowhere. I just don't remember anymore. But back in the day when I first became an advocate because of ponderings like this, you think of the cowboy days and the Indian Wars, which lasted 140 years, and the dime novels and the quote unquote, well, let's just say this, what do you call, like the famous people from the Indian Wars eras? Those people rarely did, or were responsible for, or whatever. The dime store novelists came out here, got little seeds and kernels of ideas and stories, and souped them up and amplified them and made them into series, and again, these like media pop culture type of things. And I think the same thing was true for the gangsters after you had the Depression and the World Wars, and people were looking for distractions, and people were looking for something that was interesting. And you had these gangsters who were at the time from the homeland or from overseas, where a lot of the people either knew about, the country was newer, the population was more recent. So everyone knew where these gangsters came from, and more aware of like mobsters and the mafia and all that stuff. And we always hear about the Italian mobsters and stuff from Chicago, but that had to be similar. Organized crime became organized everywhere there was criminal elements. So you had the Yakuza and the cartels, and every form of that kind of stuff had the same kind of elements. Anyway, I think a lot of that was souped up, over amplified drama. And that's, they say, hey, we have a cure to this, that we created this situation, or we're exaggerating the situation, and now we got a cure for it. And that's also in 34, communism was a thing. Like, hey, you know what we should all be is communism. Like, oh, that's the coolest new thing. Why don't we all just turn in our property? So it seems like tinfoil hat a little bit, but I think that was some of the seeds of all that stuff. I think that was, like I say, I'd like to see more research into it, because I speculate on some of that, but it seems like all those lines come together right there.
Yeah, and Roosevelt was mayor of New York, where a lot of the mob crime was going on. And so when he moves into the White House, he carries his views on what's going on with him. So I believe the senator that was pushing the NFA talked about the there was a quote, something like murder by mail. They were talking about buying firearms through the mail. And that's one thing they wanted to stop with the NFA. But the way it was framed made it sound like it was this kind of nefarious thing, like dealing with international, importation or whatever. But at the time, you could buy a Tommy gun, like from a Sears catalog, basically.
At the hardware store, and nobody really wanted them, so they marketed them a lot. Nobody wanted them because it was kind of a big, heavy, 13-pound gun that shoots full auto most of the time, and it's kind of finicky, and it was cool and everything. But yeah, you had not real use for it, so they were trying to market it heavily, and that had to be some interest. And same with the suppressors. People sarcastically or like offhandedly look at it nowadays and go, "Oh, the suppressor silencer side," but that guy was marketing it quite a bit. And, if he's out there marketing it and paying money to get in front of people's eyeballs, that means a whole bunch of people misunderstood and thought guns could be quiet. And if they listened to some book or radio show and it said the quiet gun killer killed everybody without anybody knowing and the police were helpless, now they think silencers are, from the beginning, they think silencers are magic. Potentially.
There were ads when targeting ranchers for the to sell Tommy guns too. There's
That's
pictures of cowboys holding cowboys.
On the range or whatever, like, hey, look at that coyote or whatever. Shoot it with a whole bunch of times with a 45, like N16 World Wars at that coyote.
Mandatory carry brings up the ban on mail order guns. It was proposed back then, but hopefully I'm not confusing my things, but it was left out.
That was before the NFA. There was a federal law before the NFA,
but they feared it would be unconstitutional because of the Interstate Commerce Act, or because it dealt with interstate commerce. But that's something that you will see when you start looking at all of the gun control acts, and then even today, the rhetoric that you hear, it's the same rhetoric that they were saying back then. When we get into
based on fear and misunderstanding of guns, you think guns are some kind of magical talisman that is hidden all the time when you don't need it, and then when you need it, it comes into play and it's magical, and then it goes away. Like if you understand that a gun gets super piping hot, you don't have the delusion that you're going to put the gun back in your pants after you shoot it, or the suppressor back in your pants. All right.
Yeah, and and the tactics to eliminate guns. The putting the $200 tax, making it prohibited so people don't buy it. That's similar to what in Washington we just got with the AR ban, which is working its way through. It passed the House and still needs to be voted on by the Senate, and probably will be passed, and then we'll have to deal with that once it's passed. But the intent is, the way the law is written, it grandfathers what you have, but basically it doesn't go past you. I think with this one, it's something kind of goofy, like your kids can inherit it, but like their kids can't, or something really stupid like that. I'd have to look at it again. But
that's how Canada went. Like, their first people that are alive today can be in possession because you're responsible, but your descendants.
But that's a way to eliminate those, because they can't go anywhere. They can't, no more new ones can come in, and then what is here is stuck, but it's stuck with you. So once you're gone, it's gone, basically. And that's similar, I would say, similar to levying a high tax on an item to discourage purchasing, and that's what they talked about, to discourage purchasing, to reduce the number of guns. And that's that's something you still hear today. You look at the gun, when we looked at the gun buybacks, that every single one, from the very first one to the ones that are going on today, they say it's the same verbiage, about reducing guns in the community, but you know, but they're not really addressing any underlying problems. They're just saying, well, these are being used to do something bad, so nobody should have them. And that's aside from any constitutionality. We don't like them. You shouldn't have them. We don't care if you have a right to have them.
And we don't care if we misunderstand the situation. We think this is the situation. We think this is the solution. Therefore, we're going to just push.
Yeah, and last session here in Washington, I can't remember. Woods will know if it was a state senator or a representative, but said publicly. I mean, there's video of her saying that the Constitution is constitutionality is in the eye of the beholder, and that can't remember if that's when they were voting on the magazine limit bill. But yeah, that thinking where they don't care if it's constitutional, they're going to do it anyways. Let me take a quick hello to Live Moo.
Well, the same way that I'm not too worried about it.
And Pat in the bunker.
I'm not too worried about them tripping on the Constitution, because the same way that people are like, "Oh, I lost it in a boating accident," or "from my cold dead hands," or whatever, that's the same people that are like, "I'm not going to take your interpretation of the Constitution because I have this interpretation." So if you expect to be respected with that position, then you have to be able to respect other people's position. Now, as long as they don't go to violence or something unscrupulous, they're allowed to have a position and fight for it or whatever. Not fight for it, but you know what I mean, like champion that position in however. And it's frustrating, but that's the system. So I don't fault them. I'm not a big fan of it, but at the same time, I don't get all upset about the Constitution part. I see it more of you're either at this point, especially people in Washington, they're either intentionally ignorant of the situation and they're conflating things and using that unaware, ignorance. I'm just going to use the word ignorance, but you know what I mean. I don't mean anybody's ignorant, but they're using that ignorance as an exploitation effort, and or they're literally ignorant. And if they're ignorant, you can educate them, and then they have the opportunity to go, "Oh, I'm sorry, we should have been mitigating mental health issues, or looking at the root causes of issues instead of pandering to this one potential cause of violence, or not cause of violence, but one potential tool of violence sometimes." Right? Like, and then suggesting that that's the thing. We really should have been doing all these other things. So give them an opportunity to change their minds. But I know, I mean, you didn't harp on it or nothing, but that's one of those things that I've heard a lot. Is like, "Oh, they're worried about our constitutional right." Like, they're not worried about our constitutional rights. I'm like, yeah. And you're not going to be, if they would have won the other thing and they go, "The Constitution says you can't have guns," you're going to go, "Screw that. That's not our interpretation of the Constitution." You know what I mean? And
yeah.
I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say, though.
No, I get that, and I disagree with that to a point, but I think that's a larger conversation that would more than fill our time, so we won't get into that. And I agree with what you're saying. I understand. I got you.
Yeah, you don't have to agree, but you at least understand what I'm getting.
Yeah, yeah. No, we won't get into it. Where Well, no, I sidetracked myself. Um, so, the hell was I talking about?
Well, the fact that in Washington, you guys are having, uh, well, I think you're updating on the two things that are getting pushed through, steamrolled. And I was saying that I was adding to it that they don't care about getting better at learning, but you were
Yeah.
saying they were simply just pushing things through, not worrying about if they're constitutionally correct or not. And I don't know if you were going to say like maybe they should be held responsible. It's one of those other things that like since the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, all of this stuff is like all these different states, they're like intentionally pushing stuff through that they know is going to challenge New York State Rifle and Pistol, which I understand. If they really believe their version of the Constitution is correct, which I don't believe they do, but if they do, then this is the route they would take. But then they should have to put something at stake. If they're going to push around everybody else's rights, then they should have to have consequences, and that could either be
Well,
whatever. I
the
don't know what the consequences are, but they should have to
the
pay for it.
consequences should be
Right,
in the
removal
ballot
from
box.
office or pay for it. I would
Yeah.
like to think it'd be ballot box, but I'd like to see some mechanism in place that's like, if you create a bunch of bad laws that cost us money, then it's coming out of your salary. That kind of pay for it.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and I haven't fully worked out where I stand on that.
Yeah, I don't know how to implement it. I still like that idea. I just don't know how to implement it. Maybe you can't hold office anymore. Like if you screw around and cost the country a bunch of money, intentionally or not, then you're out of there, and you can't. Like you don't have to wait to be voted out. You're just out of there. Like you can't be in there screwing around with everybody's money, even if it was unintentional. Sorry, but not sorry. Get out of here.
Yeah, because the point that I'm kind of stuck on, and it's similar with qualified immunity. If you are honestly doing something in good faith, you believe it is correct. It's in then should you be punished? I mean, there may be consequences. Like if you're voted out of your office because people don't like what you did. It's different than a punitive fine or jail time or anything like that. And I haven't quite worked through that part because I understand that it's easier when there's a fine line, but on some issues, there's a wide gap between what they're doing and I don't quite know what's right, and I don't know, can't think of a better way to put that right now. But so that's I don't have a firm position on that because I haven't worked through completely. I will tend to stay at a more conservative, not politically conservative, but stay with a more conservative view.
Less totalitarian, like if you waver outside the rules, then you're out of here type of shit.
Yeah, but so yeah, that's one I'm not sure. I'll just put it as I'm not sure yet, but I think so. So back to the NFA, and then the Miller versus U.S., which is I think the only. When I looked up NFA Supreme Court, that's the only one that pops up. So I don't know if there has been any other ones, but that's kind of the landmark that everybody will reference. And that was two men were caught with sawed-off shotguns, and they were arrested for it. The lower courts said it was unconstitutional, but then it was taken to the Supreme Court, and they overturned the ruling, and said that because because sawed-off shotguns weren't applicable to the military, that they're not covered by the Second Amendment. And one of the problems with the Miller case was Miller died before it went to the Supreme Court, and his co-defendant disappeared. So there was nobody really representing his side when it went to the Supreme Court. So I don't know if that would have made a difference had they been there to argue their case. And that kind of brings up, well, now if you take that where the Supreme Court says that because sawed-off shotguns can be left under the NFA because they're not military weapons, well, then how can military weapons be banned outside of that? The Supreme Court said that those would be what is covered by the Second Amendment. And it's not something I've really heard. I've heard that a little bit in just conversations between people, but not brought up legally. So,
well, Miller's almost impossible to figure out because both sides claim it and both sides ignore it because it's super hard to figure out. And it's the guy was a racist, right? Like he was a racist doing something racist.
One of the links, I think the University of Kentucky link that I put in the description, talks about tells basically his background. He owned a roadhouse, and then was kind of a low level crime, did stick ups and stuff, and
yeah, he wasn't a good dude, but the crime that he went to the Supreme Court for was a racism. Like he was being mean to somebody or like attempting to kill somebody, even worse. Like he was doing something like racist.
What? And
that's when they were like, if you side with the side of individual freedom and say that the Constitution says that the state can't go after this guy because of the sawed-off shotgun, then a racist walks away. And if you go, hey, a racist shouldn't walk away from this crime, you're saying the government has the ability to say a sawed-off shotgun isn't legal. So no one wants to claim either side. It's like a weird, nobody wants to claim and everybody kind of takes pieces of it. Like it's a pie with 4 pieces and nobody wants a half because both halves have a bad piece. The bad pieces are diagonal from each other. So like everybody just wants to come in and sneak a good piece out of there, sneak one angle out of it and ignore the other 2 bad angles. It's like, it's not good no matter what. And that's all we had. We had 1930s or 1934, that in 19, whatever it was. And then 1968, we have the GOA or GCA. And until Heller, nothing. So 107, almost 170 years, nothing. Anyway, Miller's a weird one. That's why nobody says nothing about it, and nobody knew how to interpret it. And now what you get with the internet is people coming in with a half-ass understanding of it, and they'll say this is what Miller is, and they'll either ignore a bunch of stuff or get it wrong, and then people start to take that person's confident incorrectness, is that the right way to say it, and then perpetuate it. And now you get all kinds of craziness. You have to go back and look at the roots. Luckily I looked all this stuff up a long time ago when there wasn't a bunch of YouTube videos that ran with confident incorrectness. We have a lot of that now.
Yeah, when you one of the interesting things that you'll find if you go in and then start researching this kind of stuff is a lot of websites that'll pop up or anti-gun websites that talk about these things, and there will be factual information within what they're saying, but the narrative of how they present it will be skewed. So if you're researching something and you come across I don't know, you name the anti-gun, the Bloomberg I hate gun website. Um, if you look at, I still will look at their stuff, because there will be some factual things in there. You just have to understand that not everything, it will be mixed with a skewed opinion. So the way it's presented I would consider incorrect. Um, but you still can learn some things from there, even if it's how they're looking at the information, so that when you see somebody else talking about it, you say, oh, okay, these are kind of the talking points that you're hearing over here. So there's the right after the NFA came the, what was it, the firearms, God, I forget basically that made the FFLs.
The NFA and then the FFA. So you can think of it as FFLs and FFA, and then it was NFA and then FFA. So it's the Federal Firearms Act. So not the NFA, the National Firearms Act, it's the Federal Firearms Act. It was 4 years later, and it created the beginning of the FFLs, which were reestablished or give them way more obligation and regulation in 1968 when they did the gun owners or the Gun Control Act.
And the Gun Control Act of 1968. That what, you'll have to help me out here. I don't have my notes.
So all the assassinations happen in 60s, right? And the world is going to shit, and everybody's there's riots all over the place. There was waves of riots in the 30s also that nobody wants to talk about, and in the 19s. So nobody wants to talk about that stuff either. But a lot of this stuff is racist. But anyhow, so racism, riots, assassinations, communism, Cold War, full effect. Right? So lots of stuff going on. And then they go, why don't we, but there was like a bunch of them actually. I think there was like 3 federal laws, and then we all start calling them the Gun Control Act as the like 4th one, kind of tidied them all up. But just the same way that it happened last year, nobody remembers last year there was 2 gun control things passed, and a assault weapons ban almost got passed. But first they said 18 to 21-year-olds can't have guns anymore. Screw them. They used to be able to not have handguns, but they could still have shotguns and rifles. Now, screw them. Because we think we're scared of them, and we might be scared of the future, nobody 18 to 21 can have guns. The Republicans voted for that. It wouldn't have happened without a whole bunch of Republicans. So Republicans voted for it. The Republicans didn't stop each other from voting for it. It happened. The Democrats all voted for it. Any Democrat who wants to act like there's pro-gun Democrats can go fuck off, because they all voted for it 100%, right? And then you got the other one where let's take $10 trillion that nobody owns, that we're just going to create, and then for the next 4 years, we're going to give $10 billion to 10 states. And if the states do exactly what we want, which is gun control, we'll give them a chunk of this federal money. And that's where you see all this gun safety stuff, this change in the Bloomberg companies or grassroots organizations, quote unquote, change into gun safety to align with that, so that they can get that $10 billion for the next 4 years. So those 2 pieces of gun control went through last year, and then they almost dropped the assault weapons ban, the new assault weapons ban. Like, that was so freaking close. What was that, 11 hours away from happening, and everybody was biting their nails, and it was 14% chance of passing, the closest anything I've ever seen in my lifetime of looking at stuff. That almost passed, and that's essentially what happened in 1968. Oh, the Safer Communities Act. Oh, the Safer Other Thing Act. Oh, the Stopping the blah, blah, blah Act. And then they finally said, you know what? Let's just do it. The 1968 Gun Control Act is going to wrap up those 3 other ones, and that's where you get the 10 things on the 4473. That's where you get gun shops can't sell across state, or you can't buy across state lines. You have to go to gun shops because of mail order, right? You can't order out of catalogs anymore. Also, import. So all of those were separate laws that the 1968 kind of tidied up. So imagine last year, we already had the 18 to 21-year-olds. We no longer value you. You can die for your country, but you can't have any rights. That's national level. Here's our future. Screw off. Like everybody who's 17, 16, and you're not feeling good about the future, well, guess what? We hate you, and we're taking away your rights for the next 3 years, which is all the time in the world for young people. So that was like the dumbest fucking move they could have possibly made at a time when we want the future to be bright, right? So instead of saying, "Hey, we respect you and we definitely have faith in what you're going to be able to do in your decision making," nah, you're going to take all that away. Horrible decision. And then that money they don't even own, right? So that's what we would have saw last year, is if they would have let those two things go and then got their assault weapons ban, they would have said, oh, we need a fourth one, and that's just going to tidy it all up, and then we'll get rid of those receivers that nobody wants, and we'll get rid of those ghost guns that everybody hates, and those bump stocks, we'll just make sure those don't exist. You know what I mean? They would have tidied all that stuff up, especially if they would have had the votes. And that's what we would have seen, the third thing, like some kind of third federal level, whatever they're going to end up calling it, the Biden bill or something,
Yeah.
We were really close to that. Sorry to keep swearing. We were really close to that now that I'm thinking about it. But that's exactly what happened in 1968. I just haven't thought about that in a long time. But that's, when you read about it, that's what happened. And we just experienced like a bunch of little stuff happened. It's sort of like cutting. Like, hey, we're gonna poke, cut. Like we can't just cut, but we can poke, cut. When everybody gets, when the metal gets fatigued, we'll rip it.
Well, the Gun Control Act took, I think it was took 3 tries to pass it. It was pushed 3 different years. Also, the NFA took a couple tries for them to get it pushed through. But with the Gun Control Act, part of it was the NFA was basically found to be unenforceable, because part of it was, if you had, after it was passed, if you had say a short barrel shotgun that was unregistered, you had to register it. But
you could,
if you registered it, you were basically testifying against yourself that you were doing something, you had something illegal, and that would be unconstitutional. So the Gun Control Act removes that part of the NFA to keep it constitutional. And then so what else was it covering?
The 10 questions. They decided that if you're under 18, you can't have a pistol. It wasn't 10 at the time, because some of the domestic misdemeanor, domestic abuse, that came later. But can't be discharged from the military, can't be a felon, can't be addicted to drugs, all of that stuff. That was the 1968. None of that existed. Actually, in 1968 also said that if you got to buy a gun from a dealer, you got to fill out this 4473 now. Before, you just used to write your name on a piece of paper. From 1938 until 1968, every time somebody bought a gun, they wrote their name on a piece of paper. And I don't know if the gun shop had to do anything with it or not, but they just did that for whatever theater that created for anybody. And then in 1968, they said, "Now we're going to have a 4473 now, and you're going to have to fill that out as your obligation as an FFL." And then I forgot where I was going with that. In addition to 4473, they also did the imports, and then I was going to say they made it so that if you buy ammo from 1968 until 1986, if you bought ammo at a gun shop, you had to write your name and address on a piece of paper. So the gun shop would just have this like pad of paper, and if you bought ammo, you'd write your name and address on there. It was like some stupid law. And so imagine you go in to buy ammo, and you're the last person on a 30-line piece of paper. You're just looking at 30 people's addresses. That's that kind of security or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's It was interesting to read Lyndon Johnson, his remarks after he signed the bill. He talks about it puts a big off limit sign to stop gun runners from dumping cheap foreign $10 specials on the shores of our country. And he said Congress adopted most of our recommendations, but this bill, as big as this bill is, still falls short because we just could not get the Congress to carry the requests we made of them. I asked for the national registration of all guns and the licensing of those who carry those guns. For the fact of life is that there are over 160 million guns in this country, more firearms than families. If guns are kept out of the hands of criminals, out of the hands of the insane, and out of the hands of the irresponsible, then we just must, it's kind of an odd sentence. Then we
You saying if they are to be kept out of the hands?
Well, you say, yeah. In order to keep them out of the hands, we just must have licensing. If the criminals with a gun is to be tracked down quickly, then we must have registration in this country. None of that would happen if licensing and registration wouldn't do any of that.
No, like
they're criminals.
It's fantasy.
Yeah, but this is from '68, and this is the same shit you hear today.
Well, you know what? That's sad, though. I mean, I don't know. This doesn't get brought up too much, but the stuff that he was reading, the 1968, is literally an English translation of the German Nazi thing. Like, there's the JPFO, the Jews for Preservation of Firearms Ownership, tracked it down to where the one dude, they have the guy going in and looking at the archives at the Library of Congress, and then days later takes literally a carbon copy of the German Nazi gun control laws, and that's the 1968 Gun Control Act. It's literally the same dude that wrote it was in the Library of Congress, and he had checked out the Nazi papers days before or something. Like, it was literally that close. Like, there's no possible, and they're almost verbatim.
It's also interesting, right after that part of his speech, the voices that blocked these safeguards were not the voices of an aroused nation. They were the voices of a powerful lobby, a gun lobby that has prevailed for the moment in an election year. He's specifically talking about the NRA. And, aside from any of the controversies going on now with the NRA, I bring this up mainly just because, again, this is the same rhetoric you hear today. The NRA is the big boogeyman that the anti-guns rally against.
And that's when it all began, because anything before then would have been against hunting or against not just hunting in general, but like, we don't want you hunting here. Like, some of it was we don't want you hunting ducks, and others of it was we don't want you hunting here. And then they would go after the hunters, and then hunters would band together, and that's where the NRA would come along and be political. But it wasn't because we don't like your guns. It was because we don't want you hunting here. Like, if they didn't like your guns, it was because you were making noise. It wasn't they were scared of your guns. So what you're talking about right there, again, that would be interesting to get some actual insight. I know a guy, I could call him. It's a little bit late right now, but I could call a guy who knows that because his dad was part of the whole thing. But there is stuff written, and I know I've read some stuff, but I've never read anything that specifically talks about that time. Actually, I have. I do know there's an article that talks about that particular moment when the 1968, essentially there was a Democrat, Dingell or somebody, there was a Democrat who said to the NRA, look, at the 1968 Gun Control Act is about to happen, and there's almost nothing you're going to be able to do about it. You better get your shit together. And then the NRA was like, maybe we'll go to Colorado and be a hunting organization and just forget about all this. And then like half the NRA was like, we're going to Colorado. And the other half was like, well, hell, we're not. Like, We won't have guns if we don't stop this, right? So that Dingle guy tells the NRA, and that's when the NRA starts to kind of divide or split. And then 1968 happens, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. 1968 happens. And then 1968, the consequences of that were the ILA, and then 1977, and then 1986. The 1986 Gun Owners Protection Act got rid of that, having to write your name down every time you bought ammo. It made it so that the states that went really crazy with infringements and blocked people from driving through couldn't, at a federal level, they said, you got to let people drive through. And then let cops drive around with their guns. I think it did one other thing, and then the fucking use it. But anyway, I'm jumping ahead. But
Mr. Enigma said, I think we could use 18 USC 241 against any politician making these unconstitutional gun laws. They are denying us our rights. Then 241 could be used to sentence them.
I don't know what that is, but is that something that has consequences for
up to 10? Is it 10 years? If two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, or threaten or intimidate any person in a state, territory, commonwealth, blah, 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 in their free. Yeah, I'm not sure if it completely would apply, but I think I've heard other people talk about that. So I'm not sure. And then politicians do have, I believe, something similar to qualified immunity, but I can't remember what it's called. So yeah,
that makes sense, so that they can't be liable for bad law or whatever.
Yeah,
or consequences of law. It sucks.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has ever been brought up on anything like that. Oh, back to here. All right. Yeah, I wish I would have taken notes. I don't know. I was worn out this week, so I did a lot of reading, but didn't take notes like I should have. But again, kind of like in everything, it seems like everything that we've covered, what you hear today regarding gun control, the anti-gun, is the exact same thing you heard 30 years ago or 100 years ago. Before that, it was mainly applied to freed slaves and natives.
There is others. Like I said, there was the hunting one, and then there has been some other things thrown in there, like sprinkled in there. And I guess I haven't done enough thinking about it. But you have things like cop killer bullets. There's been different agendas. We already kind of talked about. Did we talk about Saturday night specials and suicide specials? There's been like demonizing and marginalizing along the way. And there might be some cycles there if I had them all on a timeline, which is one of my goals, to have like some timelines to lay down next to each other, because that's one of those things that's bugged me, that I don't think that they're using an overall long-term strategy, but I think they're playing from a playbook, and they only have so many plays in that playbook, and they've never needed to add more plays, because I believe what you're saying, that they just kept going to that playbook of like 10 plays, and they just pull whatever one out and play it again. Pull whatever one out and play it again. Now, recently, they've done things like switched it up to say gun safety. And somewhere back there, they went from handgun control to violence policy. Like they've changed their names and stuff. They've changed some strategies, but not very often. And I don't know if it's laziness, or if I honestly think it's one, they don't care. because they really don't care. It's just a money machine for some people, and I don't even think that's a platitude. I really think they just don't care. Like they're not, their heart's not in it, because it's just a 9 to 5. They're like the dog and the coyote, clocking in. Their heart's not in it. They just don't really care. Some of them do, and that's sad for the ones that really think that this is their thing, because I don't think they've got a lot of allies. I think they have to deal with the people that they're dealing with because they don't have a lot of allies. But anyway, I don't think this is something that they're going to bed and worried about all that much.
I don't think so either. There's a lot of money to be made in outrage, no matter what the outrage is. Somebody's making money off of it. Gun control is no different. I believe there are people that honestly think that guns are the problem, but there are also people that don't care, and they're making a buck. We had let me say hello to a couple more people that jumped in. The goddamn bacon. Luke Wee. Oh, there was somebody else earlier that I'm pretty sure I missed. M. Gabriel. I think M. Gabriel I missed. Sorry about that. Sergeant Joe Smith. Don't Poke the Bear. And Abigail. Shorsha Finnegan. Yeah, and there's GPT Productions. There's there were there's other, like you were saying, G-Webs, gun control stuff that's in between, and I kind of I was gonna do the NFA, and then there was that ties to the Gun Control Act, so I thought, well, I would do that, and then as when I'm going through and doing the research, and then you start tripping over all these other ones, it's like, well, I can't cover all of them. That's not what we were gonna do. So there is stuff that we skipped over, but that's just so that we don't, to keep it a little more concise, which I don't know if we have or not.
Well, one of the things that I started making Minuteman, the first I've got websites, right? So back in the day, whenever I would be doing something, and I come up with some thing I was trying to find, and I couldn't find somebody else who had already summarized it or accumulated all the data somewhere, I would just take a website and make a page and start putting that stuff together, right? Because back in the olden days, you could just put stuff together and put it on a page. The internet would find it, and then other people would find it. Like, you could just do that. Like, you didn't have to worry about search engine placement, because if it wasn't already there, the internet would find it, right? So I was having trouble finding a lot of this data. I could find super biased data one way or the other, like vague summaries of the laws from like the antis and the pros, and both sides were, I'm going to say, useless, because they were so biased that I didn't know what the real deal was, right? So eventually, with Wikipedia and spending time somewhere around probably 12 or something, I probably took some time and did my first videos trying to figure out the gun laws, mainly because I would go to the gun shop and hang out there, and people would say something, and everybody knows there's the two big ones, but you don't, at first, especially back in the day before people were really paying attention to the stuff and fluent in it, you just kind of vaguely knew there was two big gun control laws, and that one of them was machine guns and the other one was gun shops. But who cares, because it didn't matter. But then once we started having conversations and I was trying to create content, I was like, well, I do care, because it kind of does matter if I'm going to say it, and permanently I want to say it right? So I made a couple of really, like, what the heck is the name of that program? PowerPoint. I made some PowerPoint presentations with about whatever I could do research on. And ever since then, I guess I've been, paying attention to this stuff. And my first PowerPoints were very vague because there was no Wikipedia back then. There was just whatever I could find on like online dictionaries or whatever. And dictionaries are super biased. So against guns. So every once in a while I would carve some time or steal some time or decide to do a project and invest some time in research, and I would update my resources. It would be either be a website page here or a social media post here. And then in whatever 2015, when I started putting together Minuteman University, that the goal there, one of the reasons I decided to do Minuteman University was because I had all these pieces all over the place and I didn't know where they were. And I would be putting stuff together and like, here's a list of books that are important. And I'd go put it on a website and I'd end up putting it down next to a list like that or a list that I had made like that 2 years before and I'd forgotten about. And I was like, dang it, I need to be putting this stuff in one place so I can just look. And instead of wasting all kinds of time making a second list, I can just update my old list, and move on. So that's what I started to do with Minuteman, is start to accumulate the data. But it's tough, dude. Like, you try to learn about the 1968 Gun Control Act, and if you go to YouTube and look, it'll be like 1968 Gun Control Act is because the NRA hates guns and was working with the government to get rid of guns. Like, that's literally what some people say, and if you just left it at that, you'd think that was the history of it. And that's like sort of a perspective. You could take that impression of it, but it's not the actual literal fact of what happened.
One of the really hard things to find, which is I like to see the context of what's going on at the time. It's hard to find. Luckily this time I was able to find, when I was researching, like the senator, that was pushing, like the NFA, their comments on what was going on, or other senators talking about, in that day, rather than, getting the thumbnail sketch of what happened. You can see their thinking, and then, I like to be able to find that also, and that's really tough to be able to find a lot of times.
Definitely for the old stuff, but starting with everything new you can. In what's his face, Hughes, that a-hole, the Hughes Amendment.
Yeah.
He did a whole bunch of horrible shit. The anti-Glock one, that undetectable Firearms Act. That's one of those 10-year ones that expires every 10 years, but the idiots keep reinitiating it. It did die for like 4 years. That's why it's not on the 10-year chart anymore. It's now on like a 2004 or whatever it was. So it's off. It's not on like a round number year or whatever. But that's the same guy, the Dingle idiot, or not Dingle, Hughes, same idiot. And then he did something else. He did a third thing. But anyway, that guy, he's new. Like, he's around. Like, or he died, but he's modern, I guess you could say. He had all the potential in the world to have written down why he was such an a-hole about guns, and I haven't found it. I mean, I haven't looked hard or nothing, but I never found anything about his position on why he did it. I don't think they care, though. I think it goes back to, they don't care. This is just a thing they do. It's like they also hate oil. They don't care why or know why. They just hate oil. They're going to hate whatever they're told to hate, or they just hate the stuff they're not invested in.
Yeah, and then you get into, I don't know if I want to get into it.
Well,
when you get into the Democrats versus Republicans, and then, the leaders of this side say this thing, so everybody behind them supports that thing, whether it's stupid or not. And then it becomes logical to them because they were told that's, which gets into a bigger issue about psychology and sociology, and the nature of people. Most people want to follow someone, and I don't. We're going to end up way down a rabbit hole there.
going down a rabbit hole. Well, I won't get into it. There's a thing that Honda should have been talking about. Anyway, I discovered a couple of things from my research back in the day, and I was sitting here thinking about doing those PowerPoints. You know, the internet was different back then. Wikipedia was still kind of new. I used to still log into Wikipedia and type in stuff like what I type. I would always go in there and type blue is better than red. I would go to Wikipedia page for red, right? Like there's a page for red. It talks about its wavelength and the color and all this stupid shit. And I would type in blue is better than red just somewhere in there. And I thought that was hilarious. And it would be in there a few days. I'd go to work or whatever and be like, go look at red on Wikipedia. And it'll say blue is better than red because I was an editor for a minute. Anyway, so that was back in the old days. You could, there was just less stuff on the internet. And I remember finding some things back then. And I would print stuff back then. Like I would print stuff off of the internet because I wasn't sure how long it would be there. It wasn't as permanent as it is now, Like if somebody built a website, you didn't know if that website was on a server that would last for a long, long time. You didn't know how long the internet was going to even be around. So a lot of times if you found something, you would just print it onto paper. And what good was that? You could read it again, but you were never copying and pasting it back onto the internet or anything. But anyway, I remember finding some stuff that I'm not going to get into. I'll tell you off air. We'll type in private chat or whatever, but I never found it again. And it drives me nuts because it's super interesting. I'll tell you in the side chat.
Early internet was interesting. Don't poke the bear was saying, wasn't there a court case around the NFA where a guy challenged the rule about SBSs and won because SBSs were common use for warfare? They're in considered common use. The only one that I am aware of was we talked about a little bit earlier was the Miller v. U.S., where it was found that they weren't used for warfare. The lower court said that it would violate the Second Amendment, but then was overturned by the Supreme Court, who said that since they weren't used militarily, that the Second Amendment doesn't apply.
I was typing. So were you talking about poke the bears thing? Because that's what the was we were just talking about.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if there was. Yeah, I'm not aware of another case.
No, that's that one. It was a sharp barrel shotgun, like you're saying. So, want to throw questions out there? I thought there was a bracket. I heard something about an NFA bracket.
No, we had to put off the bracket. There was a legal issue with the bracket. So,
what if you combined a bracket with that motorcycle game from Tron, the good one, the first Tron?
That'd be fun.
Like if the bracket is in real time, and if you mess up, the whole thing shatters into like electric glass or whatever. Oh, snap. Did we just rewind into a whole nother show because this now is a 6-minute long show because of the hour change or whatever? I don't even know when this is happening.
I don't know, but it doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, but for me, here's what happens. The rest of you people just have regular night. But you ever seen the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment? Like, I'll see like this big white kind of blue donut appear, like a sparkly donut appears in the night sky. And then it kind of goes through Tucson and we go through the time tunnel, just like in the Philadelphia Experiment. And then for 6 months, it's like we're at Pearl Harbor. And then 6 months from now, the little donut goes the other way. And then we're back to normal again.
So just as the zeros are coming in, you're transported back.
Yeah, except that it's like a whole bunch of people talking about live chatting or something. The show is over 2 hours. Gizzard just time warped another hour's worth of chat. You should jump in now, Gizzard. Is that even legal? If you jumped in now, did you just time travel? Let's spend an hour digging into AI interfaces.
I downloaded Canva to use
What?
the
You bought the real
AI
one?
for some stuff.
Oh, really? I haven't used
And
the AI. Or no, I have used the AI in Canva. It's pretty good. It's crayon AI.
well, it doesn't like anything that I put in.
Half the time, I have an AI that'll tell you what to put in there. Like you can tell one AI to tell you what to put into the other AI, so it likes it to be an interpreter. But a lot of it is like, if you say, give me a smiley face, that's a lot different than give me the smiley face from the Watchman after it falls off the guy's thing into the gutter. You know what I mean? Like it'll be two different smiley faces for sure. And then if you
Well,
give me the smiley face from the Watchman in a style of a Japanese silk cut, like whatever, silk cut or whatever that's called, then it'll be a totally different result than just a smiley face.
well, I was putting in, this thing killing that thing, and they didn't want to do that.
Oh, well, sometimes they have those filters against violence or whatever, and they'll be polite or just not do it. But yeah, if you type in like Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla, but in the style of Charles Schultz, like that can be fun.
Yeah, everything I was looking for was violent, so it did not give me anything. And there's 100 image limit for the free, and I burned through that in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I burned through 3 email addresses, and now it knows who I am, and it won't let me like log in with any email addresses anymore. I'm gonna have to buy it, but I'm gonna end up buying it because I'm addicted to it. It's pretty good. But the other ones are good too. I use like 3 or 4 of them now.
Yeah, I just did that one because you had talked about it before. So
it's the best one for images for sure.
Jason J's out there.
Also, have you ever heard of Whatnot? That's my other thing that I'm playing with now.
I've heard of it, but I haven't
It's
done.
It's this, except add eBay to it, so you can sell stuff while you're sitting here BSing. So it's just you go live and you BS, and then you can sell stuff.
Did you do a chat where you were talking about that?
Probably, because I've been curious about it, and then it had like a hurdle, a very massive hurdle. There's in addition to the very massive hurdle that I don't really want to talk about because I don't want to prevent people from dealing with it, but there's a fairly massive hurdle, and then you got to do an hour session like on a Zoom call before you can even work with them. Like they definitely, I mean, I've had jobs that had less stuff I had to do to be able to be part of it. So it's a massive amount of effort to be a part of it. And I've only done 1 or 2 live shows, but I had looked into it like 3 or 4 times because I was super stoked about the idea of going live and selling stuff. Because I like eBay. I mean, I do half of my income is eBay. I really like eBay, but I don't like eBay because it's boring. I like YouTube way better. So I'm like, hey, if you can stick YouTube into my eBay and eBay into my YouTube, that's like the Reese's peanut butter cup of the internet. Like if I can sell my garbage out of that as I'm BSing. Oh snap! You cut out. Or did I cut out?
Maybe they're being stringent on who they let in. That helps keep the scammers out.
I think so. I think that's why, because you literally have to do like I've never had to do so much stuff to get into a platform. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. It's also weird. You go in there and it doesn't seem like it's all a bunch of snooty people with their pinkies up or nothing. Like it's a bunch of normal people. But anyway, it wasn't that bad. I mean, you definitely have to do a lot. You have to do more than any place else, but they're super nice. And on the other side, like none of the platforms I've ever dealt with had you sit there for an hour. I've never even had an hour long. I mean, I guess I have for a job before, but how often do you get an hour long onboarding for a job? Like never. And this isn't a job or nothing. Like so anyway, there's like people you can talk to. I have email addresses. I like was able to ask questions to a human being. I mean, it's like a treat. It's really neat. And it's huge. From what I understand, it's like a huge platform. Tons of people use it. They're just using it for like Magic the Gathering cards and Funko Pops, as far as I can tell. It's almost like 90% Funko Pops. And I don't know shit about those.
I don't know. It was interesting watching it when you're showing it. I don't know if probably partly my age. It didn't appeal to me.
Oh no, yeah, half of it's really dumb and lame. But I'm hoping to put some of my weirdness on there, and if I can find people that want to hang out with that kind of stuff, then anyway. So that's all I was wondering. Wondered if anybody's looked into that anymore. But because as I ask around now, I am finding people that hang out there quite a bit. It's very fast. It's kind of how Instagram is. It's kind of like Instagram compared to YouTube too. You go over there, you look around, and you're out. Like I don't think people hang out there very often, or if they do, they know when. Like when the show is, kind of like Instagram, where somebody goes live every day at 6. The rest of the time, you're just momentarily checking Instagram, like popping in and popping out. But then at 6 o'clock, somebody goes live, and then you hang out on Instagram for a little while. It's probably like that, I think. But I've only used it once, and I'm going to try it again tomorrow.
You got anything else coming up?
I should have the new sewing machine here next week. So it's already ordered. I'm just waiting for it to be shipped and then, or, be en route or whatever. So yeah, be able to start sewing here ASAP.
Is it similar to the one you had before, or?
What I had before was the 700. The newest one is the 900. This one is the 800. So it's one notch more than I had before, one notch less than the one that's current right now. So essentially, it's the exact same thing as I had before. I think technically, like, I don't use the thing the way it's supposed to be used. I buy the thing and then I get my own files and I jam my own files into the USB port, and that's all I do. But the machine itself is sold to little old ladies to sew like Donald Duck on their grandkids' clothes or whatever. So the machine itself has like more fonts or something than the one before it, and it has like, I don't know, something else dumb, like more frame designs or something that I don't use. Like some stuff for the little old ladies that use it. Otherwise, it's just exactly the same machine with a different decal stuck on it that says 800 instead of 700. There's no difference in the physical and I would imagine the parts are even interchangeable, except for the software. Like the parts are probably interchangeable, but well, I'll know in a couple of days. It should be here early in the week.
Well, that should make it easier to get it up and running. You have familiarity with it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I just have to kind of remember from a few years ago, but I'm sure once I start fiddling with it, it'll come right back. And then, yeah, hopefully start kicking out. Saying thanks to the people that grab stuff. I think it was about 60-something people. So, it's going to be a number of runs, but, hopefully the first couple of days it'll be kicking out a bunch of patches for those people and then doing custom stuff.
Well, let me do this. Gearwebsites.com for your 2A related t-shirts, patches, playing cards, web design, consulting, and all that jazz.
And soon AI interfaces. And I can help you with all the stuff that AI can do. It's crazy what AI can do. It's super neat. Did I ever do the mouse logo in a patch?
I don't think so.
I'm trying to remember if I ever sewed that or not.
I don't know. I've got the 3D printed stuff that you did. And if Hillbilly hears this, I still have your email. He sent in like a couple of weeks ago on a Wednesday chat, sent in the Gorin picture, which I missed, and then I told him I'd do it the next chat, and I forgot, and then we didn't have a chat last week. So I will shoot for Wednesday. In fact, do I have it up here?
Disco is dead. Disco is not dead. Disco is life.
Oh, Wednesday nights at 10:30 is the Wednesday Night Mouse Party, right after the Daily Gun Show. It's a little more freeform, a little more relaxed. Just hang out, hopefully have some fun. Disco is not dead. Disco is life. Any parting words there, G-Webs?
Well, thanks again for hosting the show. Thanks everybody for joining in, having some conversation in the middle of the night. For everybody that's out there listening, we appreciate the people that are getting all the stuff done overnight that everybody else is not really paying attention to. Thanks for being there.
And hopefully we talked about stuff that maybe people weren't aware of, or help refresh knowledge of the topic. And I was a little disorganized, kind of as always, but this week was a little busy, so I had a little trouble getting my prep work done, but that's my fault. But I appreciate everybody that was out there in the live chat, chatting it up, and those who might have been listening and not chatting, appreciate you too. And those who watch this in replay, leave a comment. I always read the comments, and they're always appreciated. Anything we talked about, agree with, disagree with, think we left out, let me know. And other than that, I hope everybody has a good night.
You still here? It's over. Go home.